Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Luck Gamer, and we're back now with the spell changes. Now, typically, I don't feel these videos are going to include just a singular spell rank, but first rank spells are the most numerous in the game. So that being the case, this video is only going to be on the first rank spells, but I guarantee later videos aren't going to include more than one rank. First rank is also one of the bigger ones just because it's where you start the game at typically. And so a lot of the beginnings of your character start with first rank spells. So overall, I don't think it's going to be much of an issue. So before I get into it though, I do need to state that Paizo did provide to me the Player's Core and GM Core books as one of their reviewers as a complimentary service, but this is not sponsored content. So all thoughts and opinions on the changes are my own. That being the case, let's go ahead and get into the changes. And honestly, I'm not sure how long this video is going to be because I have a really long list, but how much of it is actually changes, I'm not 100% sure. Or how long this is going to take I'm not 100% sure because many of the changes are very simple. For instance, Ant Hall no longer requires a 3 gold focus. That's it. That's all that changed. So yeah, that's kind of the stuff we're going to be expecting, but there are some rather significant changes here in the spell list. But let's go ahead and continue. Actually, speaking of significant, both Bane and Bless got changed. Starting with Bane, it now starts at a 10-foot emanation, and whenever you sustain it every round, it increases by yet another 10 feet. That's very significant and makes these spells overall feel much better and not necessarily forcing casters to be directly in the front line. I think that's a very good change at all. And with Bless, it's actually even better. Bless starts out at a 15-foot emanation and increases by 10 feet every sustained action, which I'm actually curious as to the reason why Bless is larger than Bane. It's something that I find very interesting as a choice. I mean, Bless is the one that I feel like players use more often anyway. So maybe they just gave it to Bless to help with you know, what most players are using and to help casters more, because a bigger emanation means you can technically just be further back and still provide the benefit. And with Bless kind of being like a very good support ability, probably one of the best support spells in the game, giving it an increased range, I think, is mostly beneficial. And also, you don't have to be on the enemies for Bless to be effective. So you can be behind your allies in a significant enough distance from the enemies. I think it is. I think that would be the reason for the change. Other than that, I don't know. But I do like the fact that both Bane and Bless now just cover bigger areas. So now they're just overall more efficient and better. And you don't feel bad because, oh, I sustain it for a round. It increases by another 5-foot emanation, which always felt kind of bad. So this is a very good change in my opinion. This next one's very interesting because a lot of people have been implying the spell changed, but the only thing that really changed was the name. As you can see here, as I move my camera, the spell Burning Hands has been replaced with Breathe Fire. Breathe Fire does exactly what Burning Hands used to do. So yeah, name change, nothing changed with the spell though. So I don't know. There's been a lot. So actually, here's a good opportunity to talk about this. A lot of people are concerned about the changes to some of the cantrips and spells because of Psychic. And there's been a lot of confusing things, especially with the whole same name change versus no name change, yada, yada, yada. Paizo will be releasing errata material for everything. And who knows when that's going to be. All I know is that if a class can't work with one of the changes for whatever reason, just continue using the old rules until they're errated. I mean, at your home games, obviously, it's not a big deal. For Society play, I'm sure Society errata will come out sooner than anything else. So your Society directors, more or less, hopefully will get information on that as soon as possible. But if you are a Society-like director and you don't know, just default to the old rules. Nothing really changes in that regard. So I don't know. But yeah, Refire and Burning Hands, nothing changed other than the name. Here is a change that they've mentioned before on stream, and it's now that Charm has, or maybe they mentioned it. I'm sure they did, but either way, Charm now has the subtle trait. If you're unfamiliar with the subtle trait, if you haven't watched any of the other videos, the subtle trait just means that you don't need to loudly incantate when casting a spell. And unless the effects are obvious, they're not considered obvious. So Charm, you know, works, is now you can do it like standing behind the person, you can charm them or whatever. It does mostly the same things, and nothing the spell changed overall. It just now has the subtle trait. I think overall this is a very reasonable choice and made a lot of sense, even though, well, I mean, it just makes a lot of sense, honestly. Now you can charm an individual in a room without necessarily alerting the whole room that someone's casting magic, which is very good. So the subtle trait as an addition is just a buff to charm, technically. All right, here's an interesting change. So Purify Food and Drink has been changed to Cleanse Cuisine, which I think makes sense. It's a very common spell in D&D, so Cleanse Cuisine only makes sense. It kind of works the same, only now you no longer need to touch the food first, which honestly, even though the spell purified the food, just felt weird from a sanitation standpoint. You no longer do need to like actively touch someone's food to purify it. It has a range of 10 feet now, which is good. Also now, rather than just making the food like edible and clean, it actually makes the food gourmet in taste, along with the ability to remove toxins, contaminations from the food. Though it does have the added benefit that now Cleanse Cuisine, as it heightens, does additional space. I don't know who in the world is going to heighten Cleanse Cuisine to get an extra cubic foot, just a cubic foot of food more, right? Like a singular cubic foot of food is like what a person has on the table typically. Just adding one more cubic foot, I mean, I guess allows you to cleanse additional peoples, but it's every 2 spell levels. They could have heightened it once per spell level and it would have been fine. I don't understand the reasoning behind Cleanse Cuisine this way. Heck, they should have just made it a heightened to 4th and you can do 10 cubic feet. And then you would at least get like a whole table's worth of food at that point without doing this strange rigmarole for it. So, like, design principles aside, I like the change to Cleanse Cuisine. It seems really good. Now, also, you don't need to use prestidigitation in addition to Purify Food and Drink, essentially, to make it work out. So I think this is overall a buff, if you can call it that, to Purify Food and Drink. But the design principles are still a little off. So I don't know. I don't know exactly how I feel about it, other than I do like the changes. There's just some oddities to it, you know? All right, Magic Aura, right? So yeah, Magic Aura has been changed to Disguise Magic, and it's been reworked slightly. So now when you use it, you can also apply it to a spell effect. So for instance, if someone is currently under the effects of, like, I don't know, I'm like Disguise Self, for instance, you can much more easily disguise it, other than before, you could only use it on magic items. And overall, I think they've cleaned up some of the like effects of it. So for instance, it says here, a caster using Detect Magic or Read Aura of a higher rank than Disguise Magic can attempt to disbelieve the illusion using the skill matching the tradition of the spell. Any further attempts by the same caster get the same result regardless of whether or not they succeeded the check or not. So this is very interesting. As before, it said a caster using Detect Magic or Read Aura of an equal or higher level can attempt to disbelieve the illusion. Magic doesn't mask the aura of spells that are 9th level or higher, or of items that are 19th level or higher. That there's no stipulation, so it doesn't even matter what level the magic effect or aura is. It can now technically be hidden or at least shown as a reduced effect. On top of that, at the heightened level, it now no longer heightens at 3rd, it heightens at 2nd level, and at 2nd level you can cast a spell on a creature, disguising all items and spell effects on it, rather than this one where you could target a creature instead of an object. And when you do all the aura of all magic items it has, or have the creature's aura appear as if it was under the effects of a spell you know. So this is just better at disguising some effects like illusory disguise, as even before, even though you could target a creature before, you can only have it appear as a creature aura as if it were under the effect of a spell you know. So you couldn't even remove a magical effect, you just change what that magical effect looks like. So I do like the changes to disguise magic. I think this is overall just a more useful and helpful spell, and it's no longer an uncommon spell. So this is something that you can select, where Magic Aura before was uncommon. So I think overall this is just a general improvement and buff to what used to be Magic Aura, now Disguise Magic. We have a couple name changes here. Color Spray has been changed to Dizzying Colors, but otherwise works the same. Magic Missile has been changed to Force Barrage, but acts the same. And Featherfall has been changed to Gentle Landing, but remains the same. Now, in addition to this, though, there are some spells I'm surprised didn't get a name change, considering actually how iconic they are. For instance, Grease is still called Grease and still works the same. Grease is honestly a rather popular spell in D&D and kind of always has been. So this is one of those baffling lack of changes. It's strange that I'm sitting here now being like, why didn't this change? When before I've been like, why did this change? It doesn't feel like it makes sense. Like, I know they don't need to change absolutely everything, but when it comes to like iconic spell effects like Grease, this one just seems silly. Other spells that actually didn't change was the Sleep and Sanctuary spells as well. Sanctuary also being a rather popular spell, and arguably Sleep as well. I mean, Sleep could have just been changed to Doze, and I think that would have been just fine. It's baffling to me that these didn't change. And everywhere else in the books, everywhere I looked, everything mostly stayed very much the same. So these three not being changed, especially when there's also three others here that I just mentioned that did change, is just strange. I don't know. I guess it's fine, whatever. People don't have to relearn spell names. It doesn't affect anything. I just find it curious more than anything. And it's at this point in the video that I do want to state that if you are liking this content, please give it a like to give other people a chance to see the same content as well, or a higher chance anyway. And if you want to see more content like this, as there's no other channel out there covering the remaster as much as I have been, then you're going to want to subscribe, as I'm going to be covering remaster content almost up until it comes out officially, which is November 15th. So if you want to get more remaster content, see the things you love in the game changed, you can go ahead and sub to the channel. And if you want a 100% chance of seeing all my content as it drops, you can go down to the description and join our official Discord, where you'll get a message anytime one of my videos goes up, or when I'm live on the channel. We'll actually be talking a little bit later today about some of the stuff in our table talk. So if you want to be a part of the community, join us in the Discord. But let's go ahead and get to the spell changes. Here's a change that some of you might already know, but Ray of Enfeeblement has been changed just to Enfeeble. Enfeeble now no longer requires an attack roll, but you can strangely see here it still has the attack trait. Now, again, something similar happened with Frostbite, the cantrip, if you haven't watched the cantrip video. And there's no attack roll that is made, so I don't know why this particularly has the attack trait. Now, unlike Frostbite, which is more reasonable in my opinion, or is more like unreasonable to have the attack trait, Enfeeble, at the very least, if they fail, they're Enfeeble 2 for a minute, which is a very, very powerful effect. An incredibly powerful effect. So Enfeeble having the attack trait, which, I mean, I guess technically it can cause a problem for the caster, makes more sense, but it does defeat one of their purposes for making many of the spell changes, which is to keep consistency. And I don't know why a spell that does not have a spell attack has the attack trait, as that is very inconsistent. So I am prone to believe that this particularly is a mess up. This is something that will get eroded later. But if it isn't, I understand the balancing purposes. It just doesn't go along their same line. And that was one of the reasons why they're making changes to the spells in the first place, to keep consistency. So, that being the case, Enfeeble might have an error here with having the attack trait. Also, don't get me wrong, I liked the idea of Brave Enfeeblement getting benefits based on how well you made the attack roll, but that just didn't work with how the game was overall balanced as far as like spell attack rolls. So this change, I think, makes a lot more sense and doesn't necessarily nerf the caster for making one bad attack roll. So overall, I think this is a positive change and a boost to Enfeeble. All right, Illusory Disguise actually has been changed. No longer does it only target yourself. Now it has a range of 30 feet, and it can target one willing creature, which is really good. It can be yourself, but now it has the additional benefit of being used on other people. In addition, now it changes a bit as it heightens. It heightens now at different levels, now doing it at 3rd, 4th, and 7th, and each time it does, it either allows at 3rd level, it allows a individual to be a specific individual, replicating its appearance and voice and yada yada. At 4th, it can now affect 10 people, but they can't be specific individuals. And at 7th level, it's the same as 4th, but now they can be specific individuals. I will state this one no longer gains the auditory or the... What was it? It was the auditory or sensory, whatever trait. It now no longer hides the scent of the individual, which is very interesting. I find that a very strange change, but I mean, it creates more of a dynamic around it, so I'll get behind that. It should actually gain the auditory trait at 2nd or at 3rd and 7th rank casting, because it does like replicate the voice of the individual, but I don't know. Otherwise, I like this change. It always was frustrating when you had Illusory Disguise and it just only worked on yourself. There was always someone usually better in the party for whatever actions you had. So this change to Illusory Disguise just makes complete sense, and I'm 100% for it. This is a very interesting change. Disrupting Weapon has been changed to Infuse Vitality, and it's been reworked a bit. Now it's a spell that can be used as 1 to 3 actions and can target up to 1 to 3 willing creatures. This gives it a little bit more dynamicness so that you don't need to necessarily spend 2 actions on your turn to buff like a single weapon when there's only really one weapon to buff, or to do your own because why not, you know? Now you can do a single action to buff an ally, which I really like the dynamics of. And if you cast it at 2 actions, it's the same as it was before. In addition, now you can actually infuse target's unarmed strikes and their weapon strikes. It's not just a weapon, it's each target's unarmed and weapon strikes deal a D4 vitality damage. It's not specifically on weapons, so that being the case, now the ally is dual wielding, you can do both of their weapons with a singular casting. This is overall a huge buff to the spell. You don't need to do individual weapons anymore. And it still heightens and does mostly the same stuff anyway. So overall, Infused Vitality, a huge buff to Disrupting Weapon. I love the dynamic actions that allow you to do 1 to 3 actions, as this just makes it so that you can do it as you see fit during your turn. A 1 action Infused Vitality, I think, is pretty good, even still. So I think this is overall a huge buff. Another just name change here, we have Mage Armor being changed to Mystic Armor. No reason other than just renaming an iconic spell from D&D, so it makes sense. Unseen Servant has been changed to Phantasmal Minion. It again, another one of those iconic name changes. I think it's also just the same. I'm not 100% sure if there are stat changes. I glanced over a bit and they looked pretty much exactly the same. The spell works exactly the same, but, you know, hey, if you want to see it, you might want to check out the material when it comes out. So Overall, in my opinion, nothing else changed other than the name. So that's just what I'm going to put here. Protection here, I think, pretty much got a huge buff. So Protection before was an uncommon spell, and it targeted alignment specifically, which we all know has been removed in the remaster. So that being the case, that part being removed makes a lot of sense. Now, I will state that Protection before also provided a +3 bonus against effects from such creatures that would directly control the target and against attacks made by summoned creatures of the chosen alignment. So this now no longer gives a mega buff against summoned creatures and also doesn't give you a huge benefit against being controlled, which, I mean, are very powerful effects. So I can understand why it's removed now that alignment has been removed. I think overall Protection now, not only not being a common spell, so now you can select it without any kind of hubbub around it, but now when it's heightened at 3rd rank, which it couldn't do before, this effect can also apply to all allies within a 10-foot emanation around the target. A +1 stats bonus to armor class and saving throws, plus it's a status bonus, makes this actually a really good spell. Now, it is still a ranged touch, so you still need to be right on your ally in order to get the benefit for it. But I mean, still, that being the case, I think Protection now has just shot up as a much more viable spell. It feels a lot better, and honestly is probably a really solid defense spell this early in the game. So I'm actually really stoked about the changes to Protection. All right, so Magic Fang and Magic Weapon have been changed to Runic Body and Runic Weapon, and on top of this, they have been reworked, so they now heighten as you level. With Runic Body, well, with them both doing more or less the same thing, as you can see over here. You can see that at 6th rank, the spells give +2 greater striking, and at 9th rank, they give +3 major striking. Now, some people are going to argue about the effectiveness, like, why would I do this when I'm already going to have the weapons around that level anyway? And while I do generally agree with the statement, I still think it has a lot of value in one. If you find any weapons, you can now instantly use them without needing to change necessarily your runes over right away, which, getting to town and changing your runes over was always a pain in the butt. So now you can do this pretty much on the fly, except obviously the prepare casters will need to have them prepared ahead of time. But that still has a lot of gain or use. And not only that, but greater striking and major striking runes especially are insanely expensive. So Runic Weapon and Runic Body can save actually a lot of gold on your team, as well, as long as you're willing to do it, for a minute or for pretty much every battle. And obviously this is going to be much more situational. I just like the fact that you can do this anyway, that they can heighten something that people have always asked for. So I'm overall for these changes. Whether you think they're going to be useful or not, I think that I rather have these changes than not. And overall, I have nothing to complain about. Interestingly, Animate Dead has been brought over to this book, which is something I'll talk about here in a moment, and it's been changed to Summon Undead. So that's obvious. Animate Dead was also just misleading because it wasn't even necessarily you were animating a corpse. You didn't need a corpse to use it. Summon Undead makes a lot more sense and honestly has not as bad implications to it. So I'm all for this change. And I did mention it was brought over. Animate Dead used to be in the Advanced Player's Guide. And most of the spells in this list are actually just from core. So one of the Advanced Player's Guide being brought over is interesting. And here is my general thoughts on it. So I think they're splitting up the spells a bit more between the Player Core 1 and Player Core 2, just to make it not, because like first rank spells, as we can see by this video being close to 30 minutes at this point, there's a lot of first rank spells. And so to cut it down a little bit, split it up a little bit more, I think is a good choice. In addition, there's also some spells that have been removed, or what is more likely, we're probably going to see in Player Core 2. For instance, Floating Disc, which, is not like the biggest spell, but I still liked Floating Disc, is not found in this book. Neither is Animate Rope. Neither is Long Strider, which Long Strider is a pretty big one in my opinion. That was a really good buff most of the time, and now that it's gone, it's very, very interesting. And Shillelagh, which Shillelagh, I guess, if you were to look at its base component, it pretty much does the same thing as Runic Weapon does, making it a +1 striking weapon and +1 item bonus to attack rolls. But it also did additional thing against any aberrations, extraplanar creatures, or undead, increasing the number of damage it dealt. And Shillelagh was just one of those spells I feel like would have gotten some kind of change. Maybe not the damage change, but something else. Or maybe just allowing a caster to use, with either a club or a staff, their spell casting. That's not what it does now, but obviously, like, I can see Shillelagh possibly being just removed because Runic Weapon more or less does the same thing except against outsiders. But it just seemed like a strange spell to remove, in my opinion. So, with all these spells kind of being not present on the list, I'm more prone to think that the Player Core 2 is going to get some more spells that we're going to see changed. So, if any spells you liked weren't found in Player Core 1, they might actually show up in Player Core 2. One that was removed, though, that I know is not going to be coming back is Detect Alignment, because, well, there's no alignment anymore. So, that being the case, Detect Alignment really can't do anything. So yeah, that's something that I think is a guaranteed, like, no longer present in the rules moving forward. All the other spells are not found in this book, which I did just state. I'm pretty sure we will see something in Player Core 2, though maybe Shillelagh will be removed because of Runic Weapon. But Long Strider, come on. I mean, Animate Rope even. I feel like they're going to show up in the next book, but I can't know for sure. A couple more name changes here. True Strike got changed to Sure Strike, and as well, Pass Without Trace got changed to Vanishing Tracks. Both of these make a lot of sense considering that they're rather iconic spells from D&D, so their name changes, make sense, and honestly, they're Sure Strike being, I think, a bit more tenuous, but they both make sense for what the spell does, so I don't have any real complaints about that. Though we did get a more significant change this time with Shocking Grasp. Shocking Grasp got pretty much completely reworked. Well, completely. Somewhat reworked into what's now Thundering Strike, right? Thunder Strike. Here we go. And it's now a range spell. It's very interesting. I can see where they were going with this for sure, but I think some people might be more upset because Thunderstrike now only does a D12 electricity damage and a D4 sonic damage rather than 2d12 electricity damage. In addition, there's no longer the persistent electricity damage when the target is wearing armor. But, and another interesting change here, before Shocking Grasp had a +1 circumstance bonus to hit targets wearing metal, but now a target wearing metal has a -1 circumstance bonus to its save, which that's also a very interesting check. Also it's no longer an attack spell, which I think makes a lot of sense, and it now has a range of 120 feet. So now it's just a basic reflex saving throw versus an attack roll, which honestly, casters are much better at their saving throws, even though now it's more likely for the enemy to take less damage, but it's also much more unlikely for the enemy to take no damage. So I think overall this spell gets a buff. I also like this spell in general. It's actually really cool. I mean, think about it. A 120-foot, essentially lightning strike that you can do on a target. And it does a D12 and a D4, electricity and sonic damage. Granted, sure, they might have a chance of reducing that in half, but it's a pretty good spell overall. It no longer requires the caster be in melee range, and it no longer uses the kind of poor scaling of these spell attack rolls. I think you could argue either way, whether you like Shocking Grasp before or Thunderstrike now. And of course, all the Magus people out there are fuming because, Shocking Grasp was one they could use with their Spell Strike, and now they have nothing with Thunderstrike. So I think my general opinion is Magus is going to get an errata that's just going to remove the necessity of the attack trait on their spell strikes, which I think honestly would be a huge boon for Magus, as the number of attack spells is really, really limited in the game. It even not even including the fact that we're looking at just the arcane list, but attack spells in general pre-remaster were already very few. So that being the case, if Magus just got the whole versatile spell strike just baked into their kit already, I think that would be perfect. I think that would work out really, really well, and you could still use its effect. Granted, now Thunderstrike wouldn't be as good to spell strike with in comparison to Shocking Grasp, so I guess Magus just takes an L on this one, no matter what way you look at it. But I don't know. In any regard, I do really like Thunderstrike. I think it's a really good offensive spell that casters can get that doesn't require them to be in super dangerous, close range territory. Though the lack of persistent damage is a little sad. But no, actually, if the target is damaged by this spell at all, they're automatically clumsy 1. That, I think, is the biggest change. I completely forgot about that until I just read it. But yeah, that clumsy 1 for 1 round means until essentially your next turn, the enemy's AC is going to be reduced by 1 more often than not. So that being the case, that's a really big boon, and that happens even if they succeed the check, because all that's required is that they're damaged by the spell. They also be wearing, I guess, metal armor for this part as a caveat as well. But clumsy 1, I feel like, is better overall than the persistent damage that they would have gotten before. So I think Thunderstrike, in my opinion, is a boon. But if you like Shocking Grasp more, I can understand that as well. In any regard, I guess it just sucks to be a Magus, huh? All right, and that is going to be all the changes to the rank 1 spells found in the remaster. Now, as I said before at the beginning of the video, that this is much more likely to be multiple spell ranks as we're going on. Rank 1 spells was honestly just the largest part in the book, which, I mean, makes a lot of sense. So the next few videos will be 2, 3, even more spell ranks. I mean, if I look at it here right now and just eyeball it a bit, I mean, second rank spells might be its own video, but anything third rank and beyond is going to get moved into a combined video. And that's also relevant to the number of changes. I find that Pathfinder 2nd edition did a lot of good to change a lot of the names already and just make a lot of really cool, unique spells. So it's just going to be dependent. I'm predicting a minimum of 3 videos. So today is going to be number 1, and then we're going to get spell changes 2 and spell changes 3 for, today, tomorrow, and Saturday. And then after that, we'll be looking into domain spells on Sunday and the ancestry changes on Monday. So that's my current schedule. Hopefully it keeps to that. Everything might get pushed back a little bit depending on how long it takes to do the second rank spells video, but who knows. In any regard, I hope y'all enjoyed this content. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. And well, that's going to be it for me. Thank y'all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.